Security forces carried out a broad sweep in northern Samaria over the weekend, raiding hundreds of targets in Operation 5 Stones. Meanwhile, another plan was pursued to defeat Hamas and establish a new Gaza, which will give a new life for 2 million Palestinians. And despite this, Hamas is trying to hold on. But how long will patience in Gaza last after United States President Donald Trump begins to expose the major threat to Europe and the West operating in Hamas's service? In the northern arena, the IDF is prepared for the possibility of escalation, while Iranian sources claim that Hezbollah's revenge for the assassination is on its way, even amidst American pressure on the Lebanese government to act to disarm Hezbollah. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host Yair Pinto, and with me today is Mati Shoshani, and we're bringing you all the truth about what's happening in Israel. So let's go to our headlines for today. The IDF's Operation 5 Stones in the Judean Samaria area is on its way, as commando forces raided hundreds of targets in northern Samaria. For the first time, footage is revealed from raids by the Commander Division's fighters in the villages of Tamun and Farah, as more than 10 terrorists were arrested and incitement materials and weaponry were seized during the operation. This security operation comes even as a new Gaza plan emerges to defeat Hamas and provide a new life for 2 million Palestinians. A new life is needed, as you can see that hundreds of tons of abandoned food thrown to the ground on the Morag route, exposing the lie of starvation in Gaza that has dominated headlines around the world for months now. Hamas has been successful in their deceitful campaign, but now the truth is coming out, and this is not the only myth that the IDF wants to break. So, what is the new Gaza outline in Rafah, which the United States hopes to transfer to the rest of the Gaza Strip, thereby leaving Hamas with a few options? We'll bring you all the details. And meanwhile, there is a growing threat of anti-Israel Hamas terrorism in Europe and possibly beyond. They attack Israeli lecturers on university campuses, undermine Jewish communities through intimidation and fear, while penetrating into the desert of the American establishment. The Muslim Brotherhood in the United States is not an innocent organization, but an army of dozens of organizations that threatens America from within. And once again, the truth is now coming out. And elsewhere, the assassination of Hezbollah leader Haytham Tabtabi in Beirut by the Israeli Air Force is expected to change the organization's strategy. Hezbollah promises a response, with Tabtabi considered a central leader in the rebuilding of the organization's capabilities. Can Hezbollah continue to operate effectively without him? We might be able to find out, as the ultimatum set by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, for Hezbollah's disarmament is expected to expire at the end of next month, and Israel's defense establishment is preparing for the possibility of escalation on the northern front. These preparations have taken on greater urgency as Israel has lodged complaints with the Americans that the Lebanese army is not effective in advancing the plan, and a threat was sent to Beirut that the Air Force will expand the scope of airstrikes if the Lebanese National Army doesn't start to move fast. And meanwhile, international pressure led the Lebanese government to reveal for the first time footage from the army's efforts to implement the plan to demilitarize the south of the country. Lebanese media were invited to a roughly 1,000-meter-long underground route, which the tour guide said that Hezbollah handed over to the Lebanese army, and further explained about the implementation of the plan to disarm this terrorist organization. A Saudi news portal reported that the tunnel is equipped with lighting and a ventilation system. There were dozens of water bottles and food cans inside it. I've been in these tunnels, in a Hezbollah tunnel in South Lebanon, and I can confirm that they were very impressive. I'm glad that the Lebanese National Army knows where they are located, but I'll be even happier to hear that they're actually doing something about it. And speaking of doing something about it, TBN Israel senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will bring us all the details of President Trump's behind-the-scenes interactions with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the White House earlier this month. In public, It was all smiles and announcement about massive Saudi investments in the United States economy, purchases of American military equipment, and technological cooperation, but in private, the two leaders played hardball with each other. Trump designated Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally and promised to sell them the F-35s, but he put big conditions on all of it, and in general, the meeting was far less successful than the two leaders were hoping for. Mati will bring us all the dramatic details. And meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has left outside the recent arrangement between Cyprus and Lebanon and is not happy about it. The economic maritime agreement signed between Lebanon and Cyprus in light of Hezbollah's weakening in the latest blow that Turkey is receiving in the new regional order, and in Ankara, they are raising the level of threats. Despite the apparent approachment between President Trump and Erdogan, the regional triangle alliance of Israel, Greece, and Cyprus is only strengthening. Analysts claim that Turkey will probably send weapons and warships to the area of Cyprus and Israel to try to establish facts on the ground, and we will bring you all the details very shortly. So we have a lot to talk about today. Let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report, bringing you all the headlines of what's happening in Israel and the Middle East in this battle against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we start, I want to remind you that Boots on the Ground has been reporting all the truth day after day for 2 years. Thanks to you, and together we will continue to spread the truth. So by sharing and watching this content, we succeed in reaching many people with what's happening in Israel so that they will know how to pray for the situation. It's very important. So if you want to help us, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now let's start today's report with a Boots on the Ground report from an area that we don't always cover regularly, Judea and Samaria. In recent days, the IDF has been operating in two main hubs in the northeastern Samaria area, Tubas and Tamun, with the goal of dismantling infrastructures and absorb terrorists who fled from Jenin, Tulkarem, and Nablus. As part of the operation, a curfew was imposed on the areas as part of a broader effort to prevent the establishment of a new Hamas and Islamic Jihad battalions that could threaten the Jordan Valley and adjacent routes. There, the Islamist terrorist organization are trying to raise their heads against Israel. So over the last week, forces of the Commando Division, the Samaria Brigade, and the Menashe Brigade operated as part of Operation 5 Stones in northern Samaria. The operation opened with a covert action by Duvdevan and their units and their fighters and the Israeli Security Authority in the villages of Tamun and Farah, and with the elimination of a wanted terrorist south of the city of Jenin. Commando forces also raided hundreds of targets in the villages of Tamun and Farah, and the forces located an operational observation war room containing means used to collect intelligence on the movement of the IDF forces alongside extensive incitement materials. The forces also seized weapons and explosives and arrested suspects who were preparing for future attacks. In addition, Menashe Brigade forces, together with the Israel Security Authority, are carrying out engineering actions in the area as part of the ongoing activity since the opening of Operation Iron Wall. During scans of structures slated for demolition, paratroopers, reconnaissance unit forces, and regional engineering forces located an old IED lab ammunition, several charges, and additional weapons that are meant for terrorist purposes. The operation's achievements for Central Command in Samaria included 6 terrorists terminated, more than 10 arrested, dozens questioned, an operational apartment that served as a terror infrastructure destroyed, dozens of kilograms of potassium used to produce IEDs and explosive belts was found, tens of thousands of shekels intended to finance terrorist activity confiscated, along with 11 weapons and square parts of weapons. So far, 19 airstrikes have been carried out in that area. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in Judea and Samaria, so keep spreading the truth and share these videos on YouTube and follow us on social media, but make sure to only follow official accounts of Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani. And now, I want to talk for just a moment about one of our partners who have been with us throughout all the battles that we've fought since before I was born. Because here in Israel, emergencies don't wait for us to be ready to respond. At any moment, we can be hit by a rocket, a stabbing, or a car-ramming attack, or anything else that you can imagine. Every single day, there are also normal medial issues that come up, including pregnant women giving birth, elderly people having heart attacks, and people of all ages having accidents of various sorts. It can happen anywhere, at any time. And when it does, Magen David Adom is the first to respond. Before the cameras arrive or the story breaks, they're already on the scene, saving lives, calming chaos, and giving people a second chance. But staying ready takes more than courage and commitment. It takes resources, including ambulances, medical equipment, trauma supplies, trained volunteers, and armored protection. All of that takes support, and that's where you come in. So make sure that you go to savelifeisrael.com. Again, that's savelifeisrael.com. Help Magen David Adom stay strong, fast, and prepared. So when the next emergency hits, they're already on their way to save lives here in Israel. And now, we're getting back into the news and switching our focus to the Gaza Strip and what's happening there on the ground ahead of Phase B, thanks to the ceasefire between Israel and the Hamas terrorist organization. Specifically, we are looking at the Rafah neighborhoods in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, where the American outline currently being implemented is called by the ambitious name New Gaza, while IDF personnel who are trying to help the Americans as much as they can to execute this outline call the plan Green Gaza. It is supposed to be a temporary resettlement of billions of Gazan Palestinians, civilians who evacuated their homes, and then they will be rehabilitated inside the Gaza Strip from its ruins in that area under the Israeli control, and thereby, though a long process will take place, it will isolate Hamas in a way that will force the organization to disarm and cease being a dominant military and political actor inside Gaza, because the Palestinian people will come to the Israeli side of the border to receive humanitarian aid and shelter under Israeli protection. The plan is slated to be carried out first in the Rafah area east of the Yellow Line, in territory under the IDF control, while in the territory under Hamas control, nothing will happen. Not even humanitarian aid will enter there, if and when the American outline enters the implementation phase on this ground. And on the first stage, the International Stabilization Force, ISF, will enter the area under Israeli control east of the Yellow Line in the Rafah area to supervise and secure, on behalf of the Civilian Peace Council, the establishment of the new temporary neighborhoods where Gazan civilians, while not Hamas, will reside until debris cleaning and the construction of the new city planned for Rafah are completed. The temporary neighborhoods will be set up in the open areas of Rafah's eastern fringes, or in dune areas that were also empty before the war and currently have no ruins, unexploded ordnance, or mines that would endanger the residents of the temporary neighborhoods. In the second stage of executing the new Gaza outline, Strip residents, Palestinians currently living in shacks and makeshift nylon tents in the El Mawasi area, will be invited to move and live in the temporary neighborhoods established for them with funding from donor countries and the United Nations. Housing in these neighborhoods will be in caravans and tents that are arranged in well-planned compounds. Just as important, they will have water, electricity, and sewage infrastructure, as well as hospitals, clinics, educational institutions, and mosques. The Americans estimate that residents who are now in the area under Hamas control in the west of the Gaza Strip and the coastal area in almost inhumane conditions will be glad to move to the temporary neighborhoods where they will receive housing and reasonable living conditions, including gainful employment in the debris cleaning and reconstruction projects that will begin in parallel. To prevent infiltration of Hamas members into the temporary neighborhoods, the IDF and the Israel Security Authority will set up crossings in the Yellow Line with screening and filtering points, where almost other things using advanced technological means that they will ensure that Hamas members do not infiltrate or settle in the temporary neighborhoods and do not smuggle weapons into them. The IDF and the Israel Security Authority have already begun working on planning these screenings and filtering points which will allow the residents of New Gaza to be free from Hamas's terror and to receive humanitarian aid for free directly from international aid organizations. On that note, it must be emphasized that in the American outline and the planning efforts, extensive space is dedicated to the subject of humanitarian aid. The goal is for the aid to reach those in need directly, and that Hamas not seize it for its own members and sell the surplus to fund its activities. Therefore, distribution centers will be set up shortly in the area under IDF control, very close to the yellow line, which the International Aid Organization and the Multinational Stabilization Force will manage and supervise. From past experience, the IDF has learned that the surge of tens of thousands of needy Gazans towards a small number of distribution centers protected by the IDF must be avoided. Such a surge, when it gets out of control, endangers the Gazans whom Hamas persecutes and also IDF soldiers as masses rush towards them. Therefore, it was decided now to establish dozens of small, local, and accessible distribution centers by neighborhood which the Israeli security forces will protect. Hamas could indeed rob civilians, but it will not have direct access to the large consignments of humanitarian aid and will have to make great efforts to continue stealing this aid. In parallel, at the same time as establishing the aid distribution centers and the temporary neighborhoods, contractors will begin clearing the debris that are left from the battles that took place during the war and the building of New Gaza. The IDF has already begun assisting the American planners by clearing mines and unexploded ordnance in areas where it operates anyway. If the temporary neighborhoods and this project succeeds in the Rafah area, the Americans intend to continue with similar projects, first in the Khan Yunis area, after in the central camps, and finally in the north opposite Gaza City and the communities to its north. The final goal is that about 2 million Palestinians, including most of the Gaza Strip's residents who are currently in the area under Hamas's control, will move first to the temporary neighborhoods and later to permanent settlements that the Americans will establish for them with Gulf states' assistance and funding under the Israeli security side of the yellow line. It is not out of the question that Gazan civilians who wish to emigrate abroad will be able to do so if there are states willing to absorb them. The intention is that at the end of the process, which will take many months and perhaps years, the areas under Hamas control, including El Mawasi, the central camps, and Gaza City, will be emptied of most of the uninvolved Palestinian civilians that are currently living there. In this situation, the remnants of Hamas's governing and military forces, as well as gunmen from other terrorist organizations, will remain in the Red Enclave, encircled by large IDF forces with their backs to the sea without humanitarian aid. Then, CENTCOM officers assess that Hamas commanders and terrorists will have to choose between surrender, disarming, and going into exile, or slow death or fighting to the death against IDF forces that will crush them from afar. The IDF also plans to take control of the Western Strip to bring about the same result, and these depend on understandings between Israel's political echelon and the Trump administration. The American officers heading the headquarters in Kiryat Gat believe that there will be no need for the IDF to move forward with this plan. Rather, Hamas, by agreement with the mediators, Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt, will agree to lay down its arms and evacuate the Gaza Strip once it understands that it is isolated and cannot even fight properly. I must say that these assessments sound great, but I am not as optimistic as these American officers who seem to be making the classic mistake of assuming that people who are the products of Middle Eastern culture will value the same things, have the same priorities, and make the same moves as people who are products of the Western culture. Time will tell if their assessments are correct, and I certainly hope that they are, but I think that we need to be ready in the case that they're not. Also, we must not be deluded into thinking that this will be a quick and easy turnout of the situation, even if everything goes according to this American plan. This process, with which the IDF, by order of the political echelon, is fully cooperating, will take a very long time. For starters, the Multinational Stabilization Force has not yet been formed. There are still no states volunteering to take part. Furthermore, the civil administration has also not been established, and it is unclear where the funding for President Trump's 20-point peace plan will come from. But in Jerusalem, it is assumed that the American president still sees the implementation of his Gaza plan as the crowning achievement that will bring him the Nobel Peace Prize and will also allow not a few actors connected to him in the international arena and the American arenas to reap handsome profits. But the process could take even more than a year. Therefore, the IDF is preparing for a long stay in the Gaza Strip, which is divided into an area under Hamas's control and an area under Israeli control. However, the ceasefire made it possible to drastically reduce the number of IDF reservists that are being mobilized, and currently, 2 divisions' headquarters operate inside the Gaza Strip, with an order of battle including armor, infantry, engineering, and logistic forces totaling less than 2 standard divisions, compared to 5 that were reduced divisions that operated in the Gaza Strip during Operation Gideon's Chariots B. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you on these developments moving forward. And as always, we invite you to be part of the team by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and subscribing to this channel if you haven't already. Now we're keeping our focus on the Gaza Strip, but shifting slightly to the situation regarding humanitarian aid. A report emerged over the weekend from the Morag corridor, a road which runs beneath the Khan Yunis area in the Gaza Strip to the northern part of Gaza and to the Rafah area also in the south. It is a dusty dirt road that begins at the border between the Gaza Strip and Israel's southern envelope and the communities there, and leads all the way to the El Mawasi area, which is under Hamas control, where a significant portion of Gaza's population is concentrated. Reports from serving soldiers spoke of piles of white sacks and cardboard packages that were just thrown alongside the entire road. A senior officer in the sector explained that these are flour sacks and food packages that fell off the trucks loaded at the Kerem Shalom goods crossing to be brought in as humanitarian aid to civilians in the Gaza Strip. The deeper one goes into the strip, the greater the quantities of food that is tossed along the roadsides. We are talking about dozens and perhaps even hundreds of tons of flour sacks and cardboard packages containing mainly canned goods, all of them intact and ready to eat. But the peak was when the IDF reported a trailer truck abandoned by Palestinians with its cargo in the middle of the road. An IDF bulldozer had to clear it to allow traffic along this route. Strange, right? So these enormous quantities of dumped food make it difficult not to recall the complaints about hunger in the Gaza Strip that became a mantra amongst the international aid organizations and especially the United Nations. The boots on the ground team tried to clarify with the IDF fighters how such quantities ended up along the roadside. No one had a clear and complete explanation, but from the mix of things, one could arrive at only 2 hypotheses. The first explanation is that the drivers who received their pay before setting out did not pack the cargo properly, and it fell off the trucks loading pallets during the bumpy ride along the dirt road. But then the question arises, did the aid organizations that received the consignments inside the Gaza Strip to distribute to residents not check whether they received the full quantity that was sent to them from the Kerem Shalom cargo terminal? We're talking about food items worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps millions, that someone, possibly the wealthy Gulf states, the United Nations, and the aid organizations, or just international organization paid for. The second hypothesis is that looters, Hamas men or criminal gangs from the Gaza clans climbed onto the trucks with the driver's consent and threw off their cargo while driving so that their accomplices could collect it and sell it on the Gazan open market. But no one collected this food, perhaps because the IDF was operating in that area and drove away the looters, mainly Hamas's men. In any case, it would be worthwhile for anyone who financed and organized the humanitarian aid to southern Gaza to investigate what happened there. It is extremely likely that findings will refute the claim of widespread hunger and famine in Gaza. The bottom line is that the images of food that is dumped along the roadside does not align with the images of walking skeletons that Hamas flooded on social media to try to blame Israel of starvation of the Gaza Strip. Moving on, the southern parts of the Gaza Strip is now under the responsibility of the Gaza Division 143, commanded by Brigadier General Barak Hiram. The northern strip is now under the responsibility of Division 252. Most of the force currently fighting in the Rafah and the Khan Yunis area is from the regular forces, aimed at minimizing as much as possible the burden on the reservists. The defensive preparations in the area under the IDF's control east of the Yellow Line are in definitive strong points. These are temporary positions surrounded by high earth beams on which concrete positions were placed, and around them several lines of barbed wire fences. The strong points are positioned a few hundred meters east of the Yellow Line so that the open area before them constitutes a security strip. In this strip, it is possible to detect and stop terrorists who are trying and will continue to try to attack as part of the guerrilla warfare against these strong points. This deployment also enables the use of technological means as well as regular observation to identify an approaching threat and strike it from the air or from the ground after it crossed the Yellow Line, separating the area under control of the Hamas terrorists between the IDF-controlled eastern part of the Yellow Line. On the ground, the one can already discern the technological means by which just last week dozens of terrorists who tried to infiltrate from the area under Hamas control and attack the strong points were detected and struck by the IDF positions. But within the area under IDF control, there are still pockets of resistance. These are two underground enclaves, one in the Khan Yunis area and the other in Rafah. This is located where the IDF is conducting unique fighting above the ground but also below the ground in the tunnels of Hamas, with the aim of forcing the terrorists that are entrenched in these tunnels to come up to the surface. The IDF recommended to the political echelon not to accept the mediators and Americans' compromise and the proposals that would allow the terrorists to surface and move to the part under Hamas's control. The need to destroy these underground resistance enclaves stems not only from military constraints, but also to achieve a psychological decision over Hamas and its many supporters amongst the Palestinian population. The organization tried to build a myth on social media networks around the heroic underground fighters who do not surrender to the IDF, and according to the Hamas terrorists, they are the ones who will bring the resistance victory. Therefore, the IDF is determined to eliminate not only the pockets of resistance, but also the myth. With that in mind, most of the fighting now takes place around the complex tunnel network beneath Rafah. This complex was discovered by chance just a few weeks ago when terrorists hiding in it emerged and placed explosives and an ambush in which 4 IDF fighters lost their lives. And before this underground complex was exposed, about 100 terrorists who were in it who remained trapped after the IDF took control of the area above the ground. Now, fewer than 20 terrorists remain alive in that tunnel. The IDF is tightening the noose around them and below the ground to prevent their escape and leaving them one option: surrender or perish. On that note, of the hundreds of terrorists who were in these complex of tunnels just a few weeks ago, about a third have been eliminated by precision bombings with penetrating munitions by the Israeli Air Force and by explosions initiated by the engineering corps, the Alam unit, inside the tunnels. Another third of the terrorists came up to the surface in an attempt to flee or fight to the last bullet. Most were terminated, while the remaining third surrendered. This is all despite Hamas statements that there is no such thing as surrender in the Hamas lexicon. What especially hurt Hamas and embarrassed its leaders is the fact that a significant portion of those who surrendered willingly gave themselves over to the Abu Shabaab militia that is operating in the Rafah area. This is an opposition organization of the Palestinians that is fighting against Hamas terrorists in Gaza. About 5 such family militias operated in the Gaza Strip. They are not capable of defeating Hamas, but their members and their leaders openly rebel and challenge the organization's rule and endanger its support amongst the population of Gaza, the Palestinians. In conversations with people on the ground, with IDF commanders and also with members of the security forces, one frequently hears these days the claim that Hamas has been effectively defeated militarily, and that the Trump's 20-point plan is actually a rescue for it because it allows its people to leave the Gaza Strip alive and without weapons. The question is how long this will take and whether the state of Israel and the Israeli public will have the patience to bear the burden until the heavy American machine begins operating on the ground. From a tour in the Gaza Strip in recent days, the impression is that this will not happen soon, and regarding the continuation of the negotiations, Hamas updated the mediators that there is no problem moving to the second stage of the ceasefire agreement, but the main obstacle is Israel, which seeks to link the issues of weapons and control in the Gaza Strip to the issues of the Strip's reconstruction. At the same time, the leadership seeks to achieve intra-Palestinian agreement on some of the key issues in coordination with the Fatah Palestinian faction and the Palestinian Authority, with these matters expected to be discussed at the interim meeting of the terrorist organization Hamas, without formal approval from Fatah to participate in this meeting. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development regarding what is happening now in Gaza. And as always, we invite you to share our videos on YouTube, follow us on social media, and above all, click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now, we are switching our focus to the northern arena. In recent days, Israel has approached the United States and complained about the performance of the Lebanese armed forces in disarming Hezbollah. The Israeli message conveyed to the government in Beirut via the Americans is that if the Lebanese National Army does not act effectively against Hezbollah, the Air Force will significantly increase the scope of strikes in Lebanon and will reach areas that Israel has so far refrained from attacking due to a request by the Trump administration. Israel wanted to set a deadline for the internationally recognized government of Lebanon, but is now waiting for the Americans' decisions. And this week, President Trump's envoy to Lebanon, Morag will visit Israel and afterwards Lebanon. 2 days ago, a discussion was held at the top of the defense establishment on the Lebanese issue. The discussion also raised the historic visit of Pope Leo to Lebanon, which is scheduled to begin this week. And Israel will make adjustments in military activity so as not to spoil the visit, which is being covered by many media outlets all around the world. However, the Israeli threat and the Trump administration's dissatisfaction with the Lebanese National Army conduct led to the release of documentation over the weekend which has not seen before. Specifically, the Lebanese army brought journalists into Hezbollah tunnels in the southern parts of the country to present their efforts regarding the disarmament of the terrorist organization. A Western source familiar with the details told the Khan Israeli news portal that the equipped tunnel that was presented to the local reporters was discovered in recent months, estimated around the beginning of the implementation of the plan to disarm Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, which was approved in September. In recent months, the Lebanese National Army refrained from presenting such findings to the public due to internal sensitivities, but this unusual, highly publicized move was intended to reduce the pressure campaign in the international arena and from the United States. The timing is also not accidental because besides external threats, Beirut has only a few weeks left before the deadline that the Lebanese government set for demilitarizing the area south of the Litani. Also, Iran's ambassador to Lebanon warned on Saturday that the assassination of Hezbollah leader Haytham el-Tabtabi is expected to lead to significant changes in the organization's strategic outlook. According to him, Israel exceeded the restriction that it had committed to through the assassination operation, and he noted that Hezbollah's response to Tabtabi's death will certainly arrive. Acting Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem, who spoke for the first time since the assassination over the weekend, said that Israel's goal in this assassination was to hurt the morale and to sow confusion, but in his claim that goal was not achieved. However, he also admitted that Tabtabi was the most important person in managing the battlefield and in rebuilding the organization's capabilities. According to him, there is no balance between us and Israel militarily or in intelligence. This country has agents, also here, also amongst us. But that does not exempt us from mistakes, and we must learn from them. So, to give some context, according to reports, Tabtabi was skilled terrorists who knew how to operate in the shadows, was very suspicious, and perhaps he realized that Israeli intelligence was trying to track him, but did not assess the depth to which the IDF succeeded in monitoring his movement in the organization. For that matter, since the ceasefire agreement came into force about a year ago, IDF forces have conducted more than 1,200 targeted operations, eliminated 379 terrorists, and destroyed dozens of terrorist infrastructures, including weapons depots, intelligence sites, and firing positions. Israel's intelligence echelon assesses that Hezbollah will avoid an immediate response in order not to be dragged into a broad confrontation with Israel, but the IDF continues to maintain high alert on the northern border. A senior defense official said that the region is sensitive, but the IDF is prepared for a rapid and sharp response wherever a new threat arises. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update on every development in the war against Hezbollah, this terrorist organization, and we invite you to keep spreading the truth, share, click the subscribe button so that you remain tuned to whatever is happening in Israel, boots on the ground style. And now, we move to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst, Mati Shoshani. So Mati, today two major players, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, are eyeing the region, each from a different direction. Although President Trump declared that Saudi Arabia is a major non-NATO ally, the practical outcomes of the recent White House meeting were far from what both leaders sought to achieve. The Saudi Crown Prince did not show even the slightest gesture towards normalization with Israel, which is a major policy objective for the Trump administration. And meanwhile, the economic maritime agreement signed between Lebanon and Cyprus in light of Hezbollah's weakening is the latest blow that Turkey is receiving in the new regional order, and in Ankara, they are raising the level of threats. Despite the apparent rapprochement between Trump and the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the regional triangle, Israel, Greece, Cyprus, is only strengthening. Mati, how does all of this land in our neighborhood, the Middle East? Let me know.
Thank you, Yair. Indeed, what was a regional, limited conflict is now having a ripple effect throughout the eastern Mediterranean and all the way into Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. This is the effect of what started on October 7th and has now become a reshaping of the power balance, the power structures, and the powers at be in the Middle East. I apologize in advance. We're going to say the word power a lot because this whole conversation of what's been happening is about power. The big story is the meeting of MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and President Donald J. Trump of the United States. We all saw the headlines coming out of that. It seemed like this happy, this very friendly meeting, but the truth that is surfacing about that meeting is far more complex than what we imagined. It started with the headlines about the F-35, the tanks, the civil nuclear facilities, etc., the AI that would be handed over to the Saudis. But what we're learning about what took place inside that meeting is far more complex. The Saudi Crown Prince, time and time again, turned down the request of the US president to enter into another phase of the Abraham Accords, or at the least make some kind of symbolic gesture towards Israel and normalization in this region. He cited a reason, which was that his public was against the desire to normalize relationships. And according to the reports, even though President Trump put a ton of pressure, an incredible amount of pressure on him, that wasn't sufficient to shift the Saudi government one way away from where they currently are standing. And what that really means is not that the Saudis are against normalization, is that they're only willing to take a very limited, slow-moving decision pattern towards normalization with Israel and changing the power balance in the Middle East. This doesn't mean they're against the US, this doesn't mean they're against Israel. It means what they're doing is trying to slowly measure their changes, gauge the response in the Arab and Muslim world, and act accordingly. And of course, they take into account the internal pressures with other people in the royal family and of course with their people. The deal at hand is huge, and it's worth noting how important this is. It is the biggest defense contract in the history of the United States. We're talking several dozen F-35 stealth attack jets. We're talking about tanks in the hundreds. We're talking about the intelligence and technology and support to go behind it. We're talking about civil purposes, nuclear power. We're talking about artificial intelligence and the hardware that goes with it. Again, this is a massive package, but there's a huge amount of buts in this package. The US will do all of this and sell all of this to the Saudi Arabians only when they go forward with normalization and making public their relationship with the US and, by extension, with Israel in the Middle East. The Saudi Arabians will only go forward with the arrangement when they, in a very measured out phase, will see one time after the other, one, that there isn't an incredible amount of public outburst about the normalization of the relationships, but more importantly, also that the US is true to its word to really build up its power in this region. And when you combine those two, this isn't a yes or no question. you understand that where we're going in this region is a very drawn out and slow process. The Saudis want to see where the US is going. They want to see that the US, together with Israel, are able to stabilize and rebuild. First the Gaza Strip, then Lebanon, then Syria, and then they want to make sure that their involvement in that their part in that is guaranteed both by the defense measures that would be given to them. Again, the before mentioned the fighter jets, the tanks, and everything else that goes with it. And also that they're moving in tandem, moving together with the pace of this region. That they're not the only ones making bold statements, that they're not the only ones normalizing relationships with Israel or otherwise. So the entire discussion between President Trump and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is tied into a greater shift that's taking place in this region. And the shift sort of requires unpacking. Israel, in this 2-year war, fighting against Hezbollah, Hamas, the Iranians, and several other factions and forces around the world, by doing that and winning that war, we've really changed the power balance in the Middle East. And when that happened, a vacuum of power was created. The Iranians being removed from Syria and Lebanon allowed others to enter in, namely the Turks and several other countries that are now interested in having involvement in the Middle East. We'll explain that in a second. And that shift of powers has unsettled a lot of players in this region. And right now what we're witnessing in this last week is exactly that, is a tectonic plates of power shifting in the Middle East as each player is trying to see what it can take over and what it can take control over. The big player on the table that is being changed are the Turks. The Turkish government was involved deeply in the negotiation that took place in the Gaza Strip to bring forth the ceasefire on behalf of the United States and, of course, Israel, and they were very instrumental in doing that. That's one piece. They've also wanted to have a substantial stake in what happens in Lebanon and what happens in Syria. And this last week's events indicate that that's not going to happen according to their desire. Israel, first of all, has been very, very adamant about having absolutely no Turkish boots on the ground inside the Gaza Strip. That Turkey is a very problematic player from the perspective of Israel. They're a nation that on the one hand says we want to stabilize and rebuild the Middle East, and at the same time uses absolutely anti-Semitic and hateful rhetoric against the state of Israel that threatens to shoot Israeli government officials out of the sky if they fly over the airspace of Turkey. And the list goes on to over a decade of insane incidents between Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Israeli officials. So again, their agenda in this entire equation has been pushed back and set back to a substantial degree, so much so that now they're saying, we're not sure we want to be part of the negotiation that's taking place in the Gaza Strip, and we're definitely not going to be part of the boots on the ground solution that takes place in the Gaza Strip. So we talked about Saudi Arabia and their hesitancy in entering into an agreement at this time, at least as the way the United States is wanting them to do. We talked about the Turks and their desire to really affect what's happening here, and there being a lot of pushback both on the side of Israel and several other players, including Cyprus, for their involvement in this region. And now we'll get to the big shift that has been taking place right now in the Middle East, and that is a heightened conflict in the Eastern Mediterranean. Let me tell you the backstory here. Turkey and the Greeks are not friends, and that is an understatement. Turkey and the Greeks have a lot of friction that runs through the island of Cyprus. The island of Cyprus is both a trade partner and part of a trade route between Israel and Europe. And right now, something very dramatic happened in which Israel, behind the scenes, together with the Cypriots, the government of Cyprus, is signing an alliance with Lebanon. Lebanon will build a regional trade partnership with the Cypriots. And what that does is it eliminates the Turkish from their involvement inside the country of Lebanon. Now here's the real story here. Between Greece and Turkey exists an animosity that's been present on the seas and in the skies of the Middle East for decades at this point. It started over Cyprus several decades ago, but it's been escalating for multiple years. It includes violating, especially on the Turkish side, violating the Greek airspace. It includes these mock sort of maneuvers in the sea and a heightening of tension and interest in the Middle East. And ultimately, almost everything here connects to the question of money. Does gas or natural gas from Lebanon go through Turkey into Europe, or does it circumvent Turkey and go through Cyprus into Europe, cutting the Turks out of the equation altogether? And that's what we're witnessing right now, is exactly that, a strengthening of the Greek channel of power versus the Turkish channel of power. And if you aggregate that with the fact that Israel has pushed back any Turkish attempt to be part of what's happening in Gaza the day after, we could see that as an overall trend of Turkey being weakened in the last month or two versus strengthened in this part of the world. Now, one last big piece, of course, is the Gaza Strip. Let me paint you a picture. Inside Gaza Strip, Hamas refuses to uphold the ceasefire agreement. They haven't returned at this point the bodies of 2 murdered hostages that are still being held by them. They claim, of course, that they're not sure where they are, but the Israeli intelligence claims they know very well and are refusing to give them back. That doesn't allow Israel to fully withdraw from the Gaza Strip, and along with their many violations of the ceasefire agreement, we're still at a position waiting to go into phase 2, which is the international force. Let me say one thing off script for a second. Everything that's waiting to be rebuilt in the Gaza Strip is pending on one important thing: removing the Hamas organization. This isn't just the desire of Israel, this is the desire of the Egyptians. This is the desire of the United States. It's the desire of every international force in this region that can't possibly see the Gaza Strip going back to what it was before, under Hamas control. So now, guys, is a time for prayer and hope for stability and for wisdom by our leaders in the way that is, well, it's of historical magnitude. That's what's on the table. A good and virtuous process for the Middle East, or more of the violence, more of the destruction, more of the problematic phases. And I want to end on a positive note. What President Trump and his team have done, what the Israeli government and its team have done, what the regional powers, the Qataris, the Egyptians, what they've done is already amazing. The fact that we have a ceasefire agreement, the fact that the hostages are back, that is notable and that is unique in its own value. But the next phase is the important part. The next phase is the hard part, and we need to continue praying and hoping that that happens in the near future. Now back to Yair Pinto.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani, for bringing your usual clarity to these vitally important issues. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development, so keep spreading the truth, share and follow us. And most importantly, do not forget to click the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss any episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we are switching our focus once again to international affairs. A new order signed by the United States President Donald Trump instructs the United States Secretaries of State and Treasury to examine designating branches of the Muslim Brotherhood in Middle Eastern countries such as Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt, but also in the United States itself as a terrorist organization. The order may prove to be a formative moment in the struggle against political Islam, in particular regarding the Brotherhood's activities in the United States and the Brotherhood's infrastructure inside America, which is also built as a broad multi-domain network. It has been built up systematically over decades, including within university frameworks and also the academia, the media, and politics. All of this infrastructure is linked to and sometimes even controlled by Hamas operatives. To give some context, in the 1960s, the pioneers of the Brotherhood in the United States of America developed a strategy called gradual penetration, or seepage, centered on building a social and cultural infrastructure within American society that includes civil institutions, charitable and educational associations, student organizations, and religious centers. All these appear to be ordinary community activity, but in practice sought to strengthen an Islamist identity and embed themselves in the heart of the American establishment in order to generate power and influence by those who in fact constitute a vocal and activist minority amongst Muslims. One of the prominent tools of the Brotherhood in America and in the West in general is the use of double language. Towards the general public, they speak in the language of human rights, tolerance, and fight against racism and defense of liberties. But this language disappears when they address a sympathetic Muslim audience, where they use almost opposite messages that preach isolation and cultural separatism while opposing the West's fundamental democratic and liberal values. Alongside this, the Brotherhood developed terms and rules of action that allow them to shield themselves from criticism or even questions. The term Islamophobia, for example, was created as an objective sociological description of hatred of Muslims. But in the Brotherhood's hands, it became a rhetorical weapon that allows them to put their critics on the defensive Islamist organizations in the United States frequently use it to frame criticism of political Islam and extremist groups as racism towards Muslims. Media campaigns around Islamophobia enable them to enlist academics, human rights organizations, and identity and leftist movements such as Black Lives Matter and Jewish Voices for Peace, thereby extending the public protection around them. And over the years, the Brotherhood shaped a tangled, non-official network of dozens of organizations. Nowhere would the heads of these organizations admit that they belong to the Brotherhood or act jointly. What proves the opposite is the reality itself, in which these network of organizations act to promote the Brotherhood's goals by organizing and speaking on behalf of Muslim communities, penetrating the establishment, waging war on Israel, and building extensive economic networks. The network structure enabled joint offensive and defensive capabilities, with several organizations mobilizing on behalf of one of them to assist it legally, politically, and in the media according to their specific expertise. The network structure also enables high survivability in the face of attacks from outside when the organization is shut down or blocked. Another takes a place. However, the managers of the dissolved organization will not be quickly replaced, since the most important resource in the Brotherhood, as in Hamas, which comes from the same family, is the trust that is accumulated between such individuals over many years. For instance, the organizations that served in the early 2000s as pillars of the Brotherhood's activities in the United States were at the center of terrorist investigations and lawsuits that led to their closure. The Holy Land Foundation, which serves as a central pipeline for transferring funds to Hamas, was added in 2001 to the United States Treasury list of terrorist organizations. This affair ended in 2008 with the conviction of the foundation's senior officials for terror financing offenses and their being sent to prison for long periods. However, this did little to solve the problem posed by the Holy Land Foundation, as new organizations quickly formed that had almost identical goals. For instance, the Kind Hearts organization was established in 2002, but was designated by the United States Treasury in 2006 as the successor of HLF and was also dissolved. A greater challenge was posed by the Organization of American Muslims for Palestinians and its operational affiliate, Americans for Justice in Palestine. The heads of the dismantled organizations, all well known are Hamas men, reappeared as managers of the new mirror organizations under Professor Hatem Bizian, a founder of the BDS campaign and the organization's Students for Justice in Palestine, SGP. The latter is considered one of the alliance organizations that the Brotherhood forged with the extreme left and is responsible for harassing Jewish and Israeli students and academics on university campuses, and also served as one of the central actors in organizing the pro-Palestinian campus that are demonstrations after the October 7 attack took place. The latter is considered one of the alliance organizations that the Brotherhood forged with the extreme left and is responsible for harassing Jews and Israeli students and academics on university campuses, and also served as one of the central actors in organizing the pro-Palestinian campus demonstrations after the October 7th attacks. Elsewhere, the Islamic Association for Palestine, which served as a body for propaganda and support mobilization, and alongside it, the American Muslim Society, which is considered IAP's operational arm, were dissolved in 2004 following criminal and civil suits. However, the Brotherhood network also contained an extensive economic infrastructure that includes donations and charitable associations alongside control of religious community infrastructures and businesses. The Nait organization, for example, owns hundreds of mosques and real estate assets and offers Islamic loans and financing instruments to communities across the United States. In parallel, a broad halal industry developed, over which several Brotherhood bodies presides, tending to establish themselves in Muslim concentrations in Michigan and Illinois. But perhaps the most dangerous development related to the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States of America is its penetration of the political and cultural establishments. In this context, the Council on American Islamic Relations, headed by Nihad Awad, the primary actor, chair defines itself as a civil rights organization, but in practice, it is focused on inserting brotherhood figures into the heart of the American political and public establishment. According to many sources, the organization for years provided donations to various Muslim politicians. Its beneficiaries include members of Congress such as Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, known as a spearhead against Israel, and even the newly elected mayor of New York, Zohar Mamdani, who according to reports received about $120,000 from CAIR and its affiliate organizations. The ties do not end with donations, and CAIR works to gain influence and to integrate its people in government from the municipal level to the federal. In a step that raised questions, the Biden administration tried to bring CAIR back into the establishment and involve it in implementing the anti-Semitic policy that it inherited. However, in December 2023, the White House announced that it would cut all ties with CAIR and condemned its head, Nihad Awad, following a speech in which he rejoiced over the October 7th attacks against Israelis by the Hamas terrorists in Gaza. The latest to strike the organization was Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who recently declared it is a terrorist organization. Now, with President Trump's new executive order, it is possible that the United States is entering a new phase in its attitude towards the Muslim Brotherhood. If in-depth investigations indeed open into the organizations, they may open a Pandora's box, or more precisely, a hornet's nest that for decades managed to conceal its true nature and survive nearly every attempt at dismantling. The pressure on the matter are expected to come from two sides. On one side are Qatar and Turkey, both favorable to the Muslim Brotherhood and deeply involved in its global activity, including in the United States of America. Opposing them stand America's moderate Sunni allies, primarily Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, who have all outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood and which for years have been at the forefront of the struggle and the exposure of its global subversion. In my humble opinion, Israel must join this effort out of an understanding that it is in our clear geostrategic interest to dismantle the global networks of Hamas and its parent organization. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to spread the truth, because the truth is not simple and it is not a slogan. So keep spreading the truth of what's happening here by hitting the like button, leaving a comment, following us on social media platforms of Yair, Pinto, and Mati Shoshani, and make sure that you pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So when you pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for our leaders, pray for your leaders to make the right decisions, the godly decisions. Pray for all the IDF soldiers that are fighting to defend this country against terrorists on multiple fronts: Syria, Lebanon, Judea, Samaria, and the Gaza Strip. Make sure to pray for the people of Israel, but also for our enemies, that instead of hating Israel and the Jewish people, that they will start loving on us. God can make that happen. I believe that. Keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.